Hey everyone, I'm Nicholas Baum, and today I'm going to be working on a medieval battlefield. The awesome bunch at Goes Any Studio have given me permission to let me document my process to you. Throughout this video, I'm going to give you tips that I personally use to create my environments. I want to help you guys make the best environments possible, so let's go. First of all, I am painting a mud brush rapidly across my terrain. Notice how I'm not intricately picking the areas to paint, I'm just randomly moving my brush across the map. At this point we're just merely getting rid of the grass to create a darker look. Now we're changing the terrain so it's not completely flat. We have to give the player the feeling that there is some depth within the scene, so I put things on different height levels. I also wanted a middle area where a siege ram could come from, and create lower areas on either side that soldiers could charge through. See how I am randomly painting again? I'm not paying attention to the details, not yet anyway. All we're trying to do right now is create shapes. Create shapes that later we can build upon. The key when starting out on a scene like this is to not think too much, just be sporadic and not too over the top and establish some interesting shapes. Now I am using the erosion brush. This is great for creating realistic sloping on small areas. Again, you can see me painting randomly across my elevation. I'm not thinking too hard here at all. If you have watched some of my previous videos, you'll know that I love to use the ramp tool. The ramp tool is seriously underrated. It's something you don't really hear much about. The ramp tool is great for creating slopes for you to then build upon and then add more shapes to your scene. At this point, we're using a mixture of terrain brushes, as you can see. Once you have established your initial shapes, you're really just working with and changing those shapes until they look just right. Now we've created enough shapes to now build another landscape texture layer on top. Again, I'm just currently building information, I'm not actually detail painting whatsoever. As you can see, I'm just randomly painting. You'll hear me say this a lot, but when at the start of a scene, the best thing to do is to just loosen up and just keep working away randomly until it starts to shape up and look more detailed than just a flat area. At this point, you can see me select a puddles landscape layer. I'm just doing this to break up the mud layers and add even more variation to the scene. And I'll keep saying this, I'm switching between different texture types right now. There's no magic rulebook on how you should do this stuff. The best way for me, and I hope helps you, is to just keep hacking away at it until it starts to take shape. Now I decide that we need more elevation variation, and to give off the feeling that it's muddy and wet, so we start adding puddles into the mix. Notice how I'm working in stages, I'm only focusing on the landscape at the start. Without stages, you're just running in blind, everything is too random and everything starts getting really messy. You'll learn my stages throughout this video though. What I am doing here is I'm getting the erosion tool, making the brush size fairly big and then setting it to lower in the settings. Again, this is just purely for shaping the landscape. I want it to feel like many soldiers have been walking on it. I want huge siege boulders and push down land, as well as attack siege equipment lowering the terrain. And so to do this, we use the erosion tool with the settings set to lower. What this essentially does is selects a smallish area within the large brush and then lowers small points down within that area and gives you some noise variation upon your terrain. What I'm showing you next I think is so important, if not one of the most important things when doing a scene. The collection system in Unreal. This is every level artist's best friend, and I've seen far too many artists in my time go without using this. Without this, you're just trawling through the content browser looking for stuff related to what you're trying to do. Spending 15 minutes at the start of a project choosing what assets you want to use is crucial for two very good reasons. One, you will save so much time because you have your assets in one place, and two, consistency. If you spend time picking assets for a collection associated with what you're trying to create, then it means that when you get round to creating it, you'll hopefully have a consistent theme throughout your scene. As you can see, now we're starting to add objects finally into the scene. One important point that I really want to make is notice how I'm only dragging out from the collection. That's because it's much faster to drag from the content browser than duplicate an item and drag it to a location. I exclusively do this and it will save you so much time if you do too. Again, at this point, I'm still at the point where I just need to keep working at it. Note how I'm really not focusing on where I'm placing things. I'm just rapidly adding models to areas and rotating in different ways. This first pass needs to stay as random as before. My general philosophy with this is if you spend too much time thinking, everything always ends up looking really ordered and neatly placed. And trust me when I say this, I've seen far too many artists work this way, and it never ever looks good. In reality, you'll get the most out of your scene if you just set your brain to chill out mode and you just go with the flow. Pop some music on and just go for it without stopping until it's ready for the detail phase. Another thing I really want to note, earlier I spoke about being random with your movements and try and just be really sporadic. There is also a lot of common sense that comes with these things. Placing planks over puddles so troops don't get stuck in the mud, rescaling objects that I've used more than once so we don't have repeated looking models, rotating models that are the same as the others to add variation, stuff like that. When working fast like this, you really want to use the scale and rotate tool to the limit. Otherwise, everything will start to look really repetitive. Also, remember, having my pre-built collection on hand is allowing me to get through this without much effort because I already know that everything is really consistent together. When I get further along in the scene, I like to go and take a breather. It's always really important to go and take a break because when you get back to the computer, you might have a fresh idea. In this case, I did have a fresh idea. I decided that there should be a really thick swamp on one side of the battlefield, and we could use this as a natural blocker for keeping the player within the playable area. I really only spend about 10 minutes max on this area, so again, I'm still in my mode of just being random and sporadic. A lot of the time, when you get hired to do a job in the industry, these jobs of level art and level design are separate. However, when it comes to freelance with indie studios, you're usually expected to bridge between both of these. I personally think that every level artist should also be a level designer. Each skill complements the other and makes you better at each one, and I tell you what, I see far too many people just knowing level art or just knowing level design, and it never really ever looks as good as somebody that does both. For anyone that's curious what the difference is between the two, say you're just starting out or something like that, a level artist is somebody that just dresses the scene. All they're doing is they're making it look pretty, they're lighting it perhaps as well, and they're just generally trying to make it look nice. A level designer though is somebody that sort of looks at the scene and decides how a player would traverse that scene, and then they build blockouts or something like that around that, and that's then passed over to a level artist to then make look good. We're now onto what I would like to call the detail pass. This time, I'm actually focusing on areas, I'm zoomed in on them, and I'm adding bits that aren't just clutter objects, but big objects too that really make a difference to the scene. This part takes a bit longer than the rest. When detailing, I like to add bits of detail and then add what I call filler props in amongst them. And I just rinse and repeat this endlessly until the scene looks filled out with objects, and you're going to see this a lot throughout the next part. Now we're on to my favourite part, the Foliage Pass. This is pretty much the final part for me. You'll see a lot of artists select a large amount of multiple foliage assets, and they'll paint that all at the same time. In my opinion, this is just the worst way of doing it. You end up having far more foliage than necessary, and it always looks like overkill. The best way to do it is to just select one foliage at a time, use that across the whole scene, and then move on to another, then another, and then another, each time doing a quick detail pass across the scene. Also, bear in mind your foliage is not in your collections, so be mindful not to use too many different foliage types. Try and pick foliage that is consistent with each other and the biome that the scene is set. Another thing I see a lot of people worry about with foliage painting is performance. In my eyes, I always think to go over the top and then optimize at the end. With the right LODs set up on things, this is just something you shouldn't care about at all. Also, a lot of the time, the client job will have a technical artist on the team. At least that's how it's been for me. That allows you to shift that worry onto them instead. So just be free and paint until it looks good. First make it look good, and then worry about the technical bits later. If you're sat there wondering, he just said LODs, what does that mean? Well, a lot of people do know what this means, but if you're new to the industry, then that's fine too. LODs stands for level of detail, and it is pretty much as it says on the tin. It's basically how the model looks at different distances, and how it looks affects how much polygons it has. So the polygons are what makes up a 3D model, and in turn it is also what affects performance on a computer or console or whatever you're working with. For this next part, we're going to re-go over the steps explained before, and we're going to apply them to this war camp area that we're making. It's important that you guys see these steps more than once so that you can fully see how it works. As you can see, once again, we're just putting in the big bits and the shapes. We're placing these tents around randomly, and we're painting on the terrain randomly to add more detail to the scene. Like I said before, we're just working away at it currently, adding detail and shapes, that's it. I added a small bit of detail into this initial shapes pass so I can work out just the general look and feel of how everything's going to be. It's fine to do this as long as you get back on the path of the stages again. As you can see, I quickly go back to establishing more of those shapes after this. Once again, we're just moving to the outside of the camp and adding more large objects and shapes into the mix. It's really that simple. Turn your brain off and just go with the flow. If something looks bad, fix it later. Just keep going. Try to be as sporadic and as fast as you can possibly be. By this point, we're done with the shape stage, and we're on our first detail pass. As you can see, this is quite a large area compared to the battlefield that we worked on earlier, so I will do multiple detail passes on this one. Each detail pass will be more intricate than the next. With my collection system on hand though, I don't have to worry about things looking out of place, and I'm saving time not trawling through the content browser as well. Now we're back to my favourite stage again, the Foliage Pass. Just the same as before, I'm using one foliage asset each time and I'm doing a pass with it. And I'm maintaining a small variation of assets so that I don't oversaturate the scene with non-matching foliage. I also want to note that I never use a large brush, I always stick with a small radius brush for this stage to maximise detail. When it comes to adding foliage, I tend to treat it like the shape stage. I don't really focus where the foliage goes. As long as I'm using consistent types of foliage and not too much of it, then I know I'm on the right path and it will all come together. Foliage grows naturally and randomly in our real world, so you should paint naturally and randomly. If you start spending too much time on it or concentrating on the tiny bits, it's just going to look bad. This is the final stage for me on this. I call this the cleanup stage. We're basically just going across the whole map, both the battlefield and the war camp, and just deciding if anything needs to be added to make it look better. Fixing floating objects perhaps, or maybe just removing or editing areas. This is the stage that allows you to relax knowing you're going to come to it when you paint randomly in those early stages that we were talking about before. So that's it from me. To summarise to you guys, it's really about confidence. Confidence is the #1 thing you need to go and do these things. Obviously there is some skill involved, but confidence makes up about 60% of this. Learn to just let yourself go, not think too much and just relax and go with the flow, but also have common sense on how things should be placed, and use techniques such as moving, scaling and rotating to prevent things looking repetitive and boring. Always try and spice up your environments by adding variety to it, like we did with the swamp for example. Always try and come up with new and interesting ideas. Your shape phase should lead you to this anyway though. Once again, thanks for joining me on this one. If you liked what you saw and want more of this sort of thing, then please give a subscribe below, as I really want to do more of these tutorials. Also, we have a Discord server where you can ask for help, or you can even give suggestions on what videos you want to see next. I'll post the link down below in the description. That's it from me, and I hope you had fun. See you later. Cheers!